It is probably the nightmare of every person who works in a hospital. A small child is admitted with unexplained symptoms. Everything is done to stabilize the child's condition, but it is to no avail. The child dies. But what happens when the already terrible story is not over yet? But when there are reasons for the child's death that are darker than anything one would like to imagine. On January 17, 2014, Lacey Spears called a friend in a state of disarray. She was at home with her young son Garnett and was quite certain Garnett was having epileptic seizures. The friend immediately made her way to Lacey's home. When she arrived, she saw that 5-year-old Garnett really did seem to be unwell. Unfortunately, the boy has always had health problems. But now Garnett is sitting pale on the sofa. Next to him, his feeding tube. The friend agrees with Lacey. Garnett urgently needs medical help. Lacey and her friend take the boy to the nearby hospital together. There, Lacey tells them that her son has had 3 seizures in the last few minutes. The doctors immediately perform an EEG but cannot detect any abnormalities. Nevertheless, Garnett is doing really badly. He complains of headaches, has diarrhea, and is vomiting. At some point, the symptoms that Lacey thought were a seizure pick up speed again. But the EEG is still normal. Instead, it shows a significant slowing of brain waves, and that, of course, puts the doctors on high alert. Garnett can no longer breathe on his own and also has significantly elevated sodium and chloride levels. 2 days later, it is clear to the nursing staff that this case requires specialists. The little boy is flown by helicopter to Westchester. There, he is admitted to the intensive care unit of the Maria Ferrari Children's Hospital. Although specialists are taking care of his treatment, the boy's condition continues to deteriorate. And on January 22nd, 5 days after his admission, Garnett suffers from cerebral edema and a brainstem infarction. As a result, little Garnett Spears was declared brain dead. He died the next day. But what caused these strange symptoms? Why did Garnett Spears have to die? Unfortunately, the doctors were unable to save the boy. However, the doctors at the first hospital did one thing that, in retrospect, ensures that the little boy's death is being looked at again very closely. Because the EEG was normal the first time, the doctors set up a camera in the boy's room to be able to film any further mysterious seizures. This resulted in almost 42 hours of video footage. And when it was routinely reviewed again, something was noticed. When Garnett first comes to the hospital, his condition seems to improve a little. He stabilizes overnight and is actually doing relatively well the next morning. Then he goes to the bathroom with his mom. Lacey is carrying an insert for Garnett's feeding tube and a white cup. When Garnett comes out of the bathroom again, his condition worsens and he has to vomit and suffers from severe diarrhea. Then it gets a little better before Lacey and he go to the bathroom again. And shortly after, Garnett's condition deteriorates dramatically again. And again, Lacey was the one who took him to the bathroom and had the white cup with her. And then there are the inexplicable sodium and chloride levels. One of the doctors puts 2 and 2 together. He believes that Garnett Spears was administered a lethal amount of salt through his feeding tube. This would explain the abnormal blood values and the drastic symptoms after he and his mother disappeared in the bathroom. The doctor consults with colleagues at the second hospital. They agree. While they are still fighting for Garnett's life, they call the police. The doctors suspect that Garnett's mother, Lacey, is behind all of this. The police therefore launched an investigation. Of course, this could not bring Garnett, who had since died, back to life. But little by little, it became clear that this was not just a case of a sick child, but a murder case. Lacey had made sure that Garnett had a feeding tube put in when he was an infant so that he could receive liquid nutrition. When Garnett reached kindergarten age, one of the doctors treating him questioned whether the feeding tube was still necessary, but Lacey never had it removed, and this despite the fact that Garnett was able to eat normally. When he was at friends' houses or when there were snacks in kindergarten, he always ate normally. Only at home was he fed by his mother Lacey through the feeding tube. When he was just a few months old, Garnett was in hospital for the first time because of abnormal sodium levels. The cause of this could never be determined. Lacey and Garnett moved a few times, and of course, Lacey always looked for new doctors who only knew the child's exact medical history from Lacey's descriptions. When he was 3, the two moved to a community called Fellowship in New York. This is a kind of project in which younger residents and families live together with senior citizens. The senior citizens are helped in their daily lives by the residents, and in return, the younger people are allowed to live there for free. Food, kindergarten, and school places for children are also paid for. Lacey takes devoted care of the senior citizens, and they think Garnett is pretty cute. Lacey tells everyone about the boy's serious health problems, but to all intents and purposes, he seems pretty normal and active. One of the senior citizens at the fellowship gets a call from Lacey when Garnett is dying. Lacey already knows that the police have been called in and that her son is brain dead. She tells her fellow neighbor this on the phone, but she also asks the senior citizen to do something. She should go to Lacey's apartment and throw away the bag for the stomach tube, which would be hanging there. The neighbor thought this was strange at the time. Today, we know that it was probably an attempt by Lacey to get rid of evidence. During Garnett's childhood, Lacey visited numerous doctors and hospitals with him. She repeatedly told the new doctors about diagnoses that had actually been refuted long ago. And a few days before Garnett was admitted to the hospital in January 2014, she Googled things like normal sodium levels for a child and dangers of high sodium levels in a child. During a search of Lacey's apartment, 2 large open salt packs and 2 inserts for Garnett's gastric tube on which high salt residues were found, as suspected by the doctor. In other words, Lacey Spears poisoned her own child. But why? Lacey had a baby with Garnett when she was 20 years old. The father's name is Chris Hill, and at the time he was a neighbor of Lacey's. The two weren't really together, but rather casually dating. Nevertheless, it was always clear to Lacey that she wanted to keep the child and raise it on her own. She had already earned extra pocket money as a babysitter and later worked in a kindergarten. She always built very close relationships with the children in her care and their families. For some families, she even got a little too involved. The case is classified as what is known as Munchausen by proxy syndrome. This is a mental disorder in which a person intentionally causes or fabricates symptoms or illnesses in another person. Most often, this happens in parent-child constellations. In this case, Lacey has Munchausen by proxy and simulates the illness of her child Garnett. And she goes so far that Garnett dies as a result of her deception. She intentionally made Garnett sick and invented symptoms that her child didn't actually have. There is not much research into the causes of this syndrome yet. It is suspected that unresolved psychological problems often underlie it. More specifically, low self-esteem or past abuse. Diagnosis and investigation is difficult because people with this syndrome often remain well hidden. They plan the fake medical histories of their victims so precisely that it often takes years before they are caught, if at all. Incidentally, the name comes from a German Baron von Munchausen, who became known in the 18th century for telling obviously totally exaggerated tall tales. The healthcare system in the United States offers a few loopholes for Munchausen by proxy syndrome. This is because of a law that prevents doctors from requesting medical reports from other doctors or viewing records without the parent's permission. And that, of course, makes it easier in theory for parents to lie about their children's medical condition and thus get treatments that aren't really necessary. The thing is, from their own skewed point of view, the parents think they're doing no wrong. Lacey Spears still maintains to this day that she does not have Munchausen by proxy. She also says she did not put the salt in the inserts for the stomach tube. When she later comes to court, Her lawyer argues that sodium was also in the infusions that Garnett received at the hospital. That is true, of course, but the containers found at Lacey's home sometimes contained the equivalent of 60 small salt packs. And of course, no hospital IV has that much. The defense argues, however, that Garnett ultimately died of inadequate medical treatment. And now, they just want to blame everything on Lacey. The evidence makes the case look a little different, though. Lacey has also lied about other things. For example, she claimed that Chris was not Garnett's father at all, but a police officer named Blake. He had died heroically in the line of duty. Lacey even posted a memory of Blake's funeral service on social media and how much she would miss him. Incidentally, this police officer named Blake really exists. However, he is alive and well and still on the job today. He met Lacey 2 or 3 times 10 years earlier. It is only through Lacey's investigation that he learns that she has been presenting him as the supposed father of her son for years. Garnett's medical records show warning signs very early on. When the boy was just 5 weeks old, a doctor noted in his records that Lacey Spears might have Munchausen by proxy syndrome. However, Lacey simply changed doctors whenever her stories didn't pan out. And that's exactly how she was able to continue, until she finally went one step too far. Lacey Spears was sentenced to 20 years in prison for second-degree murder. She will not be eligible for parole until June 2034 at the earliest, and is still in prison today. Lacey also says she was never diagnosed with Munchausen's by proxy by a psychiatrist. She is in perfect health and is wrongfully imprisoned. The court, on the other hand, has found it proven that Lacey has the syndrome and that her son ultimately died because of it. If you liked the video, please leave a like, comment, and/or subscribe. Any support really helps a lot. Otherwise, there is not much more to say. I wish you a good morning, noon, or evening, or whenever you watch the video, and hope to see you again in the next video. Until then. Ciao, guys.